Thank you very much for your warm welcome, Kerry, and I really appreciate the opportunity of being here with you today at this fabulous resource for Melbourne and beyond. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nation, the traditional owners of the lands upon which we meet today, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I also wish to acknowledge their long and continuing relationship with the land and to honour the powerful oral tradition of shared voice that are expressed through the stories and songs that speak to the wisdom and enduring culture of Australian First Peoples. And I'd also really like to take a moment to acknowledge the women on whose shoulders that we stand, mothers, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, and perhaps many women we have never met, but who nonetheless have made it possible for us to enjoy the many freedoms that we do enjoy. Their work, their love, their courage, their determination, their shared values, and their voices have made this possible. In particular, I want to acknowledge the important role of women who have helped to build the graduate union, and the women who continue their legacy, including CEO Kerry Burnett. And other amazing women who are here and online who I don't know very well. Thank you. And finally, I'd like to acknowledge the many women who have spoken up, who have advocated for change and continue to do so, who have held out a welcoming and helping hand for those less able to do so on their own, not least of which the Australians of the Year, Dr. Miriam Rose Ungermer-Bauman, Grace Tang, Isabel Marshall, and Rosemary Karaoke. Clearly a long list and worthy of reflection upon as we gather here today to explore empowered voice, what it is, why it matters, and how to embrace it. And I'd invite you all just for a moment, just to pause and reflect perhaps on the amazing women in your own lives and those you know that you would really like to honour in this way, just for a few seconds.
Hello? Yes. Oh, it's Kate, is it? I'm in the middle.
Oh, technology is a wonderful thing.
No, I'm so afraid of her getting online.
Oh, it's quite a process. Well done for us doing this in a hybrid way. The new normal, whatever the hell that is. I'm a child of professional opera singers. Voice was a currency in my family. It was performance-based, where my parents could shine for those few brief moments in the public gaze of admiration. Voice was also the main source of identity and success, both amplified by the extent to which the voice was recognised and acclaimed by others, or not. The sense of self was externalised, its power given to others. Being seen and heard was loaded with expectations, desires, and disappointments. But in private and behind closed doors, there was much silence and little spoken truth. There was a palpable disappointment of singing careers cut short or not fully realised. The pain of this loss permeating most of my childhood and adolescence. I learned these lessons of voice very early and very well. The right voice was rewarded. It had to be beautiful, melodic, well-placed, classic in style, and for public consumption. The wrong voice was dismissed. These two voices, public or private, strong or silent, powerful or impotent, superficial or authentic, came to dominate my life for many years. However, despite my fears of being and sounding wrong, I began to challenge these lessons of the past, deciding that I wanted something different for myself and something better. I started changing the internal scripts and began to give my inner voice and myself a voice, This has been liberating and is, I should say, a continuing process. And I think that would be true for all of us. I know I'm not alone. In my experience, most people have barriers to using their voice. And I know firsthand the power of the voice to release these blocks so that we can free our voices and by extension ourselves. So this is the lens through which I want to explore and share my own insights into empowered voice today, what it takes to speak up, what stops us, and what to do about it. Not much to cover, huh? As a holistic voice practitioner, I focus on voice as a pathway to creating whole of person well-being from the inside out. So voice is both the means and the outcome. Using voice and sound in a holistic way can help us expand energy, strengthen our boundaries, gives a greater sense of self, more self-confidence, and create wellness on every level of being, just through using simple vocal techniques and reflective practices. And I founded Live Life Out Loud some years ago as a result of my own journey towards embracing an empowered voice and a growing frustration with seeing accomplished, amazing, strong and smart women who nonetheless will still struggle with speaking up about what matters most to them. This plays out in all sorts of ways, all of which impact our health, our relationships, our well-being, our sense of self, and our personal freedom. So, what is empowered voice? With a bit of luck, this technology will work. I'm trying to change a slide, but for some reason I'm unable to do so, but there's a wonderful person here who knows all about technology, so I shall continue on. This slide is a quote from the American author Rebecca Solnit, and it says, "The right to speak is a form of wealth, and silence and powerlessness go hand in hand. Using your voice and speaking up is difficult, no matter who you are, and is something that I imagine it's working now. Excellent. Thank you so much. I imagine that each one of us has experienced at some point in our lives. Voice is essential to each one of us to have our needs met, to express our emotions, give voice to our values and the things that matter to us. And it's also vital for enabling us to challenge injustice and inequity. And in this, we all have a role to play, regardless of gender, ethnicity, status, or belief system. I focus on women's voices in the work that I do, recognising the particular barriers and challenges that women face in being seen and heard. And we've certainly seen much of that in recent weeks. The events that have made the news are not news probably for most of us in this room. I doubt there is anyone present who has not at some time struggled to be heard or felt the impact of others who wanted her silence and attempted to dismiss her words. As the March for Justice rallies held around Australia recently and attracting thousands of women and men show us, it's profoundly clear that women do not need to find their voices. We already have them. However, it's important to acknowledge the environment in which speaking up occurs. There are many cultural, societal, and structural impediments that are resistant to women's voices. And I imagine we've all encountered explicit or implicit messages like good girls should be quiet, we should be respectful, we don't want to be strident or too loud, or any sort of variety of those or version of those. As we know only too well, when we challenge societal norms, we meet resistance and a whole raft of responses that are designed to silence us, make us pliable and compliant again. So it's impossible to talk about empowered voice without putting this in context. However, there are many people far better qualified than I to speak about these broader issues. So I'd like to come back and talk about empowered voice from the perspective of holistic voice. And I'm hoping it works. Yes. The voice is a creator of realities. It impacts how we feel, how others feel, and how we see ourselves and the world. Each voice is unique. There is no one who has your voice. And it's an integral part of our identity, imbued with all we were, have been, and will become. It is, in fact, our vocal fingerprint. And voice is also a tool for learning and teaching, building up and tearing down, reaching out and cutting off. It's vital in creating our health and well-being and in our communities, and needs to be acknowledged as such. What we vocalise and how we do this is of utmost importance. The choices we make can either diminish or support, weaken or strengthen, disempower or empower ourselves and others. And while we use our voice to speak and communicate our needs and wants, the idea of voice goes much deeper. Having a voice gives an individual agency and power, and is a way to express our beliefs and our deepest truths. So literally and metaphorically, voice is often associated with empowerment. When someone is described as not having a voice, this is synonymous with not having a say or the ability to contribute, educate, influence. There is a strong link, therefore, between speaking and power. When we feel powerful, it's easier for us to use our voice in assertive, peaceful, and authentic ways. It's easier for us to ask for what we need, to be clear about what we don't like, to tell our stories and be open about our feelings. It is easier to be honest. When we do not feel powerful, however, we may be too afraid, frustrated, or disillusioned to use our voices authentically. And this is harder to be honest, and it effectively shuts us down. There is great inequity in the voices that are valued and heard. And I say this from the point of view of a privileged white woman nonetheless, that there are many marginalised women, women of colour, Aboriginal women, women with a disability, women from CALT backgrounds, and women from the LGBTQI communities. Empowered voice is both the process and the outcome. And for me, an empowered voice also means having the ability to harness the innate qualities of the voice, the vibrations, to be able to strengthen, energise and heal ourselves, hence the inside out reference. So whether through vocalising, vocal practices, singing, everyday interactions and conversations, storytelling, poetry, our voices allow us to realise our power and tear down the obstacles, the things that stand in our way, and our own understandings of ourselves as powerful, capable and worthwhile individuals. What stops us using our voice? There are many barriers. Personal ones I'll start off with first. Beliefs, often in my experience based on others' opinions and their comments from early years. You're a child perhaps singing at school and someone tells you not to because you're too loud or too flat or too something. And so we take those beliefs on and those comments and we make them our own for life. Our scripts and our negative self-talk based on these beliefs, I can't, I'm not good enough, etc., etc. Previous experiences that have effectively shut us down in some way and therefore shut us up. Our perceptions about what we sound like, oh, I can't, I'm this, I'm that, what have you. We've all got a whole lot of stories going along. Fears, that's a big one, of being wrong, of not being approved of being humiliated, of being punished in some way, and less commonly, physical impediment. I'd like to ask for a moment, if you could do it by a show of hands, who among you loves your voice? Excellent. Excellent. So some of you, it's a question that people find incredibly challenging, and it's one I ask a lot in the groups, because predominantly people do not love their voices, and by extension themselves in some way. Other barriers relate to setting and situations. So it can often depend on who we're with and where we are. So we may find it easy to speak up at home, but not in the workplace, or vice versa. We may find it difficult to speak one-on-one, in groups, but we're really fabulous one-on-one, or vice versa again. We may find it challenging to speak to someone in authority and power, not surprisingly. We may find speaking in front of an audience very easy, but singing in front of people, oh my goodness, and it's right up there with one of the biggest fears. And we can speak up for others often, but not for ourselves. And then we're advocating for someone that we care about. And then as we've touched on, there's societal barriers, the societal and cultural norms that impact our ability to use our voice, creating filters through which we judge ourselves and others. And these are there are gendered norms as well around the inappropriate or appropriate masculine behaviours and feminine behaviours about how we use our voices, what they sound like, and they contribute to our ability to speak up or not. I imagine many women here will have had the experience of getting talked over or saying something they think is valuable only to have it ignored and then having the same idea expressed by a man minutes later and having this applauded as brilliant. There's some smiles here. When women do speak up, as we have seen time and again, and challenge societal norms, we meet considerable resistance that is designed to re-establish the status quo. And this helps no one. Speaking up and speaking out is everyone's job. It's not a woman's issue, it is a societal issue. And we know that societies and communities thrive when women do. So, what does it take to speak up? Would you like this to work? Yes. It's important to acknowledge that speaking up is not necessarily easy, as we've discovered, and particularly speaking truth to power. Yet it is nonetheless something that we can all do. And I love this image so much. This sense of taking that leap of faith. There's a sense of excitement and yes, I can, no matter what, with the fear. Speaking of which, Grace Tame referred to fear beautifully in her March for Justice speech, where she said, fearlessness is not an absence of fear, but a refusal to stop it from allowing us to move forward. So, and for me, I think the women leaders in all sorts of ways, in whether it's in communities, in their families, or in the public arena, really embody empowered voice. So what does it take? Well, I think it takes courage. It takes a strong sense of self, clear boundaries. We know and we value ourselves enough to share what's most important to us. We are grounded and really clear about what these values are and have made a commitment to ourselves to speak out of these no matter what. Our physical voice is aligned with our inner self. And it's that quiet inner knowing of the truths and our own wisdom. And Dr. Miriam Rose Berman refers to this as, I hope I pronounce this correctly, dadiru, this deep inner spring where we listen deeply to ourselves and we hear ourselves. When we focus on the message or our mission so much or get caught up in the passion of what we're saying that we forget to be afraid. When we practice giving voice regularly in all sorts of small and big situations, and it might be as simple as sending back a cold meal or saying that speaking for something that you want in your personal life. And then when we get bloody angry, and we've seen a fair bit of that as well, and reach that tipping point where we say enough is enough, that we aren't going to continue on to take it anymore. It feels worse to stay silent than to take the risk of speaking up. When we advocate for others often, it's easier. When we're inspired by others and we have their example to follow. When we have positive and powerful role models. And when we don't have to do it alone. And I think that point of the individual and collective is hugely, hugely important. I wonder if any of those scenarios resonate with anyone here. A few nods. All of these are grounded in energy, our own internal freedom and sense of personal power and agency in our own lives. So, speaking up is part of it. Yes, good. This is the placard. from the March for Justice rally in Melbourne that I just felt really spoke to, I guess the really important part is being heard. Having our voices heard is a critical part of this process. It's a reciprocal process that builds relationship, connection, and community. It's unfair and unhelpful to place the onus totally on women, or any other group for that matter, to be more confident and to speak up when there are barriers, all sorts of barriers that prevent us from doing this. And the point is, when we do speak up, are we heard? Big question mark, watch this space, I suspect. The experience of being heard confers value and worth, that who you are is acknowledged, that what you say matters and is important, that who you are is of value and you're worth listening to. And as we know all too well, it's often a reflection of status and power. So what happens when our voices are silenced, ignored, or dismissed? It can feed into the construct somehow that we're less than. The impacts of not being heard are feelings of impotence and frustration, a sense of unworthiness, humiliation, poor confidence, sometimes depression, and a sense of powerlessness. Just for a moment, for those of you who aren't still eating, I want, and for those who are listening online, just for a moment, put your hand over your mouth and try saying something and experiencing what that feels like.
Hello, how are you?
Pretty frustrating, yeah? Yeah, like wearing the mask a bit, indeed. But that's a simple example, but a sense of often what people can experience when they're not being heard or they don't feel that they can speak. The collective impacts of not giving voice and being heard for women in particular have been well documented by a lot of research, many commentators and so forth. So some of the impacts are women's voices and ideas are either ignored or diminished in public debates. Workplaces, including the public sector, miss out on diverse skills, knowledge and expertise. There is a lack of opportunity in education and employment. And I read this statistic. Women make up more than 2/3 of the world's 796 million illiterate people. That's from the UN. It's pretty shocking. Our health outcomes are compromised and those of our communities as well. Critical issues are diminished as women's issues in the same way that work that's not valued is considered women's work. And whole communities of women, as we've talked about, are particularly disadvantaged. So the point is we need to liberate our voices. We've got them already, release them from our own internal barriers, and also be able to start to speak up from this really grounded place. There needs to be action. And I'm known for encouraging people to say, woohoo, but I won't do it too loudly into the microphone. I was asked in a shop the other day when I was purchasing actually these boots, just saying, always an opportunity to show shoes. But she said to me in my high school, she just finished, she started university, and she said, there's some really inappropriate behaviour going on at my school. My younger sister's still there. We've made complaints. I don't know what to do about it. What can I do? And this is part of what we spoke about. It all starts with us as individuals. Taking the opportunity and responsibility to use our voices is ours in ways that are aligned with our values and support our individual and collective well-being. It's not just for individual gain. So when we let our voices serve as connectors between our inner and outer selves, between each other, it's a very powerful place to be. The good news is the human voice is not just a brilliant instrument for self-expression and creativity. It is also the perfect medium for releasing blockages, the cages, hence the reference, our internal cages, the things that are keeping us stuck. We can use the vibrations of the voice to literally shake up and release stuck energy with simple vocal practices and reflective practices. And it's all based on the science of sound. And we know that the body is predominantly made of water. Sound travels brilliantly through water. And we don't just experience sound with our ears. If you've ever heard fingernails being scratched down a blackboard, you'll know it's a whole body experience. So this is part of the way in which we can work with voice. The blockages and the cages can manifest like old patterns of thinking and often being on the hamster wheel of these things that we just can't let go of. Vocal roundabouts, these are a particular favourite. I hate of mine if I'm allowed to use that word. Real bugbear where we might start to say something, oh, I really want to da-da-da-da, but I, or I'd really like to da-da-da-da. We shut ourselves down. We never actually allow ourselves to have or express the full thought. Life-limiting beliefs, I can't, I'm not good enough. Negative self-talk, reflecting those. Life-limiting behaviours, constraining ourselves in some way, not stepping forward into things that we'd love to do because we're frightened. Physical restrictions, so we know when we're anxious. We often do upper chest breathing, so being able to bring the breath down. We have vocal restrictions, we have low energy. Voice can help to shift this, and emotional issues as well. And the really cool part about all of this is your voice is available to you 24/7, is free, and is the ultimate DIY toolkit anytime in the day. And even when we don't use words, we communicate so much about ourselves through our tone. You know, the tone, don't use that tone of voice with me, young lady. Our volume and our pitch. When we're tired, our voice will reflect this. And when we're angry or happy or sad, you'll know, even if someone's using honeyed words, you know when people are experiencing something else. So think for a moment how you vocalize every day. Laughing out loud when you find something funny. Yelling out, likely, possibly with some expletives when you stub your toe. Crying when you're sad. If we weren't able to express our emotions and our inner experience in this way, again, we feel likely very frustrated. So the central piece in all of this is to create that internal freedom. This is the place from which all else arises, regardless of the external circumstances. Listening to ourselves deeply from that very inner quiet space and speaking truth to ourselves in the first place is critical. Having a strong sense of who we are and being in the driver's seat of our own lives is the best place to be. And it is critical to creating an empowered voice. So voice can enable each one of us to step into our personal power and be more of who we are, not do more in every part of our lives. And really importantly, joining our voices with others around a common purpose, whatever that is, provides us with that reciprocal support that enables us to really step forward. So how does this feel? Well, you know you are using your empowered voice when there is an ease, there is strength and the certainty of knowing that what you are giving voice to is your truth. And we also really recognise empowered voice when we experience it. It resonates with us at the deepest level. And we hear beyond the words being said to the other person's truth. And when we hear that empowered voice, it can profoundly move us, give us goosebumps, inspire us, and perhaps even bring us to tears. When we use our empowered voice, there is no feeling of holding or contorting what we say to fit with others. We don't second guess ourselves, we trust ourselves. We don't keep quiet to keep the peace. We have less negative self-talk, greater self-confidence, more self-belief, a greater ability to speak our truth, and have no need to argue or cajole, and a greater ability to act. What we say just is. That is really powerful. That doesn't mean we're hurtful, blaming, or necessarily strident. It does mean, though, that who we are is what we say, and vice versa. And it is from this place that we can live our lives out loud as individuals and as a community. The three key elements are I am, selfhood. I can, releasing ourselves from our barriers, And then I act the outward expression of voice in whatever way resonates with you. I did promise it wasn't going to be death by PowerPoint, so this is the last one. So we've listened to my voice for quite a while now. I heard it, uh-oh. This is a very easy thing, and I'm going to invite you all to stand if you are able to. And we're going to explore how we can bring our voices together today to experience the potency of a shared voice in a familiar but perhaps way, but perhaps a little bit different. I want to share 3 fundamental, I can't help myself, I always want to give people tools. 3 fundamental vocal practices that are incredibly easy and can be done anywhere, anytime, and even here. And for those of you listening online, in the privacy of your own office or home. These are practices that can both make space for your voice, renew you when you're depleted or in overwhelm, soothe you, and also energize you and help you to start becoming unstuck. So who's up for this? Yay, everyone's pretty excited. Oh, well done. And I promise it won't be scary, I promise. And often what I find is one of the best ways that when people start using their voice, if you want to at any time close your eyes and just go within and experience it for yourself, letting go of judgment. I have one rule, which is we leave the critic outside, okay? Really important. So I invite you first of all just to connect in with your breath. Just your beautiful, lovely, easeful breath. Just notice the flow of breath and see if you can bring the breath into your tummy. So we're not doing upper chest breathing, it's this beautiful slow rhythm. It's if you have a balloon in your abdomen that you are gently inflating on the inhale and releasing on the exhale with ease, not forcing, just allowing. Just allow the breath to fill you and notice what happens when you just slow your breathing down and take a beautiful deep breath. Then we're going to do 3 longer exhales through the mouth. So we'll breathe in through the nose and then release through the mouth. And again. And one more. And this time, we're going to do something you probably do intuitively. Perhaps visualizing whatever you've been carrying, your busyness, whatever it is, watching it roll off your shoulders. We're going to take a deep breath in 3 times again and release it. But this time we're going to make some sound on ah. Think of yourself collapsing on the couch at the end of a hard day. We do this anyway. We're going to do it in a mindful way. So again, lovely deep breath in. Release on the ah. Ah. Make it juicy. Ah. And one more. Ah. And if you'll notice the difference between just releasing with the breath and now releasing with some sound is a far more potent experience, generally speaking. Now, I'd let you keep doing it for longer, but I want to try one more before we finish for the day. And this is something that we can all do easily. No, I'm not going to get you to sing. We can just do the hum. So invite you to again close your eyes and just really take a moment to find a very comfortable pitch just for you with your perfect instrument. And then we're just going to hum for a few minutes and let's see where this takes us and listen to each other and ourselves.
Someone that kind of still experience whatever that's been. Thank you for your warm-hearted participation in that. Threw that one at you. Please have a seat. And thank you to those at home or in your offices who participated also. These songs, these sounds, I should say, these practices are so simple and yet can be profound. I would like to finish just by saying that your voice and using your voice is your birthright. And it's such a powerful tool to be able to step into your personal power, but also to have that experience of shared voice. So I'd like to finish by asking one more rhetorical question, which is for you to think about for a moment, what is the one thing that you can do today in terms of the way you are using your voice to speak your truth, or whatever it is, to step into that place of empowered voice. Taking action is key. And I thank you very much for your time and attention and participation. Thank you.